After a close call with a house in my own neighborhood, I knew this was my calling. So, I joined the fire department 5 years ago. The training was tough, but I loved every minute of it. I worked hard, climbed the ranks, and eventually became a senior firefighter. Last Tuesday, we got a call about a house fire in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was a big one, and we knew we had to act fast. As we pulled up to the scene, I could see the flames licking the side of the house, threatening to spread to the neighboring properties. We jumped into action, unrolling hoses, and setting up our equipment. I was directing water at the base of the fire when I heard a commotion behind me. At first, I thought it was just a crackling of the flames. But then I realized it was a human voice, and it was getting louder. Suddenly, I felt something hit me hard on the back. I turned around, confused, only to see a woman in her 50s swinging her purse at me like a weapon. She was screaming about her garden, demanding that we stop what we were doing immediately. I tried to explain that we were attempting to put out a fire. But she seemed more concerned about her petunias and the fact that our truck was blocking her driveway. I was astounded. Here we were risking our lives to save someone's home. And this woman was worried about her flowers. I attempted to reason with her, explaining that this was an emergency. But before I could finish, she swung her purse again, catching me on the shoulder. It was surprisingly heavy, and it felt like she had a brick in there or something. The woman continued her tirade, insisting that we worked for her because she paid her taxes. By this point, my colleagues had noticed what was going on. One of them, let's call him firefighter A, tried to intervene, warning the woman that she was interfering with our work and that it was a criminal offense. In response, she threatened to show us what criminal really meant, and proceeded to kick firefighter A in the chest. We were in the middle of battling a serious fire, and we had to deal with this Karen. I made one last attempt to reason with her, explaining that the sooner she let us work, the sooner we'd be out of her way. But she was having none of it, insisting that our job was to protect her property, not destroy it. She even threatened to call the police. I almost laughed at the absurdity of the situation. Firefighter B informed her that the police were already on their way, as it was standard procedure for a fire this size. This information only seemed to enrage the woman further, her face turning an alarming shade of red. For a moment, I thought she might spontaneously combust herself. The woman declared that the police could arrest all of us for vandalism and trespassing. She made another lunge at me with her purse, but this time I was ready. I dodged it, which only seemed to infuriate her more. She started swinging wildly, hitting anything and anyone in reach. Just then, I heard sirens approaching. The police had arrived. 2 officers quickly assessed the situation and moved in to restrain the woman, as they tried to calm her down and guide her away. She became even more agitated, kicking and screaming. She managed to scratch one officer's face and bite another's hand. It was like watching a toddler throw a tantrum. Except this toddler was a grown woman who should have known better. The officers, realizing that reasoning with her was futile, informed her that she was under arrest for assaulting emergency personnel. This announcement only fueled her rage further. As they managed to get handcuffs on her, she continued to yell and thrash about, proclaiming herself the victim and threatening to sue everyone involved. She even boasted about her husband being a lawyer as they led her to the police car. As I drove away, her shrieks and threats could still be heard. I shook my head in disbelief and turned back to the fire. We still had a job to do, and we had to do it. After all, it took us another hour to fully extinguish the blaze. By the time we were done, I was exhausted, sore, thanks to the purse assault, and covered in soot. But at least we'd saved the house and prevented the fire from spreading. As we were packing up our equipment, the homeowner, whose house we'd saved, came over to thank us. He looked embarrassed and apologized for his neighbor's behavior, expressing his disbelief at her actions. I assured him that it wasn't his fault and that we were just glad we could save his home. He then mentioned that he was friends with the police chief, and promised to ensure that the woman would face consequences for her actions. I appreciated his words, but I was too tired to think much about it. I just wanted to get back to the station, shower, and sleep for about a week. The next day, my supervisor called me into his office. I was worried I might be in trouble for how we handled the situation. But it turned out to be the opposite. He informed me that the police chief had called to commend our team for our professionalism during the incident. Apparently, our little troublemaker had a history of similar behavior. When I inquired about what would happen to her, my supervisor explained that she was being charged with multiple counts of assault on emergency personnel, resisting arrest, and interfering with emergency operations. The district attorney was pushing for the maximum sentence. There was more to the story. The supervisor revealed that the homeowners in the neighborhood had started a petition to have her removed from the community. As for her husband, it turned out he wasn't a lawyer at all but an accountant, and he was filing for divorce after this incident. The supervisor had one more piece of news. The family whose house we saved wanted to throw a barbecue for the whole department as a thank you. They were calling it the No Karens Allowed party. We both laughed at that. It felt good to know that for every entitled person out there were plenty more who appreciated what we did. As I left the supervisor's office, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Sure, we might have to deal with difficult people sometimes. But at the end of the day, we were making a difference. And that made it all worthwhile. The No Karens Allowed party turned out to be a huge success. The whole neighborhood showed up to thank us. And I even got to meet the police officers who had arrested the woman. They shared some hilarious stories about her continued antics at the police station. Weeks later, I testified at her trial. She tried to play the victim, claiming we had traumatized her and destroyed her precious garden. But between the body cam footage from the police, our own testimonies, and her prior history of similar behavior, the jury didn't buy it. She was sentenced to community service, specifically volunteering at the fire station. I'll never forget the look on her face when the judge announced that part of her sentence would involve cleaning our trucks and equipment. The day she showed up for her first shift, I was there to greet her. She wouldn't meet my eyes, but I could see she was fuming. I welcomed her to the fire station, pointed out where the cleaning supplies were, and couldn't resist making a quip about her garden, mentioning that petunias were quite resilient. She glared at me but didn't say a word. As I watched her awkwardly mopping the floor, I couldn't help but think that sometimes justice does prevail. If we're lucky, it might even teach a lesson or two along the way.